To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Robert Hayes adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, the scar above his left eyebrow catching the afternoon light. 15 years as a Marine, 10 years building a construction empire from nothing, and 3 years since Diana walked out with half his life's work tucked under her manicured nails. The divorce papers might have called it irreconcilable differences, but Rob knew better. Greed had a way of making people incompatible with decency. His phone buzzed against the dashboard. Emma's contact photo, her bright smile at last year's homecoming, filled the screen. "Dad, you're still coming tonight, right?" His daughter's voice carried that nervous edge she'd developed since the divorce. At 18, she'd become the family diplomat, constantly smoothing over the jagged edges her mother's choices had created. "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart. Graduated summa cum laude from Princeton. That deserves a proper celebration. Trevor's been really supportive through everything," Emma said, her tone carefully neutral. "I know it's weird, but he's actually helped me figure out my career path." Rob's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. Trevor Manning, the hedge fund prince who'd convinced Diana that a construction worker's love wasn't worth her time. The man who'd smiled at Rob across the mediation table while his lawyer carved up 25 years of marriage like a Christmas turkey. "I'm sure he has," Rob said evenly. "I'll see you tonight." He ended the call and stared at the construction site across the street. His crew was finishing the foundation pour on what would become Manning Financial's new headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on him. Trevor had unknowingly hired Rob's company for the project through a shell corporation. Sometimes the best revenge required patience and proximity. His youngest son Luke appeared at the passenger door, backpack slung over his shoulder. At 16, Luke had inherited Rob's build and his mother's sharp intelligence. A dangerous combination in a teenager who'd watched his family implode. "Mom called," Luke said, climbing into the truck. "She wants me to come early tonight to help set up." He made air quotes, his voice bitter. Translation: "She wants me there to make sure you don't cause a scene." Rob pulled away from the curb, navigating the afternoon traffic with practiced ease. "What kind of scene am I supposed to cause?" "The kind where you remind everyone that Trevor's been screwing Mom since before the divorce was final." Luke stared out the window. "Alex is already there, playing happy family. Makes me sick." Rob's oldest son had chosen sides early and often. At 22, Alex had gladly accepted Trevor's job offer at Manning Financial, trading his father's blue-collar legacy for a corner office and a company BMW. Blood meant nothing when the price was right. "Your brother made his choice," Rob said. "We all have to live with our choices." Luke turned to study his father's profile. "You're planning something, aren't you?" Rob smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm planning to celebrate your sister's graduation." The truth was more complicated. 3 months ago, Rob had discovered something that changed everything. A private investigator's report sat locked in his office safe. Photos, bank records, and communication logs that painted a picture Diana and Trevor would kill to keep hidden. They weren't just having an affair. They'd been systematically planning Rob's destruction since before their relationship went public. The evidence showed wire transfers, forged documents, and a conspiracy that went back 2 years. They'd been playing a long game, positioning themselves to take everything Rob had built while destroying his reputation in the process. The graduation party wasn't just a celebration. It was supposed to be Rob's funeral. But Rob Hayes hadn't survived Fallujah and built a construction empire by being predictable. If Diana and Trevor wanted to play games, he'd show them what real strategy looked like. "Dad," Luke's voice cut through his thoughts. "Yeah. Whatever you're planning, I'm in." Rob glanced at his son, seeing himself reflected in those determined eyes. Luke was the only one who'd refused Trevor's bribes and Diana's manipulation. The only one who remembered that loyalty wasn't a transaction. "Just follow my lead tonight," Rob said. "And trust me." As they drove toward the penthouse where his daughter's party would unfold, Rob mentally reviewed his plan. Diana and Trevor thought they held all the cards, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the man they'd betrayed. By tomorrow morning, their perfect world would be nothing but rubble, and Rob would be standing in the aftermath, holding the hammer. Chapter 2. The Lion's Den. The Meridian Tower pierced the Manhattan skyline like a glass and steel middle finger pointed at heaven. Rob had built the foundation for this building 8 years ago, back when Diana still pretended to love him and Trevor was just another trust fund baby playing with daddy's money. Now Trevor owned the penthouse on the 47th floor, and Diana had traded her wedding ring for a key to the elevator. Rob parked his Ford F-150 between a Maserati and a Tesla, the truck's battle scars standing out among the pristine luxury vehicles. Luke whistled low as they approached the building's marble entrance. "Place screams, 'Fuck you, money,'" Luke muttered. "Language," Rob said automatically, though he agreed. The lobby was all gold fixtures and imported marble, designed to make visitors feel small and unwelcome. The kind of ostentatious display that screamed insecurity to anyone who'd earned their wealth through actual work. The doorman, a thin man with dead eyes and a practiced smile, looked them up and down with barely concealed disdain. "May I help you?" "Robert Hayes," Rob said. "My daughter's graduation party." The doorman consulted his tablet with theatrical precision. "Ah, yes, Mr. Hayes. Ms. Manning is expecting you. The express elevator to the penthouse is—" "Manning." Rob's voice carried an edge that made the doorman step back. "Ah, yes, sir. Ms. Diana Manning. The penthouse elevator is just past the main desk." Rob filed away the name change for later consideration. Diana had wasted no time erasing their history, but she'd forgotten that some stains never wash out. They rode the express elevator in silence, Rob's reflection staring back at him from the polished steel doors. The suit was new, tailored and expensive enough to pass inspection among Diana's new crowd. But underneath the civilized veneer was a man who'd learned to kill with his bare hands before he'd learned to read a profit and loss statement. The elevator opened directly into Trevor's penthouse, and Rob stepped into a world designed to impress and intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while abstract art worth more than most people's houses hung on the walls like trophies. The space screamed wealth without warmth, all sharp edges and cold surfaces. "Daddy!" Emma rushed toward him, radiant in a blue dress that matched her eyes. Rob's anger dissolved temporarily as he wrapped his daughter in a bear hug, breathing in her familiar shampoo scent. "There's my Princeton graduate," he said, pulling back to study her face. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." "I'm glad you came," Emma said, but her eyes darted nervously toward the crowd gathered around the main living area. "Everyone's been asking about you." Rob followed her gaze and immediately understood the dynamic. This wasn't a family celebration. It was a carefully orchestrated social event designed to showcase Diana and Trevor's new life. Rob recognized several faces from the society pages, along with Trevor's business associates and Diana's new country club friends. They all looked at him with the same expression worn by people visiting a zoo, fascinated but careful to maintain distance from the dangerous animal. "Robert," Diana approached with the smile she'd once reserved for tax auditors and door-to-door salesmen. At 43, she was still beautiful, but there was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage. Success looked good on her, but it had cost her something essential. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a black cocktail dress that was elegant without being flashy, expensive without being obvious. The diamonds at her throat were new, significantly larger than anything Rob had ever bought her. The message was clear: this is what real money can buy. "Diana," Rob nodded, refusing to use her new last name. "Beautiful place." "Trevor has wonderful taste," she said, her hand finding Trevor's arm as he materialized beside her. "You remember Trevor, of course." Trevor Manning looked exactly like what he was, inherited wealth wrapped in a Ralph Lauren suit. Tall, lean, with the kind of refined features that suggested generations of good breeding and better nutrition. His handshake was firm but soft, the grip of a man who'd never swung a hammer or carried a rifle. "Robert, good to see you again," Trevor said with practiced sincerity. "Emma's told us so much about your business. Construction, right? Must be satisfying, building things with your hands." The condescension was subtle but unmistakable, the verbal equivalent of patting a dog on the head. Rob smiled and squeezed Trevor's hand just hard enough to make him wince. "Very satisfying," Rob said, "especially the demolition part." Trevor's smile flickered as he withdrew his hand, and Rob caught the brief flash of concern in his eyes. "Good. Let him wonder. Where's Alex?" Rob asked, scanning the crowd. He's networking, Diana said with obvious pride. Trevor's been introducing him to some very important people. Alex has such a bright future ahead of him. Rob spotted his oldest son across the room, laughing at something a gray-haired man in an expensive suit had said. Alex had inherited Diana's social instincts and Trevor's sense of entitlement, a dangerous combination that had transformed Rob's son into a stranger. And Luke? Trevor asked, his tone suggesting he'd suddenly remembered the younger son existed. Right here, Luke said, appearing at Rob's shoulder with a plate of hors d'oeuvres. Great party. Really feels like family. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife, but Trevor either missed it or chose to ignore it. Diana shot Luke a warning look that he returned with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Well, Diana said, her hostess mask slipping back into place, we should let you two mingle. Emma's been dying to show off her father to everyone. As Diana and Trevor drifted away, Luke moved closer to Rob. This whole thing feels like a setup, he whispered. They're all watching you like you're about to explode. Rob had noticed it too, the careful positioning, the way conversations paused when he passed, the security camera he'd spotted disguised as a smoke detector. Someone was expecting trouble, and they wanted it documented. Just smile and be polite, Rob murmured back. Let them think they know what's coming. But as Rob worked the room, shaking hands and making small talk, his mind was cataloging details. The layout of the penthouse, the location of exits, the faces of Trevor's security team masquerading as wait staff. Diana and Trevor had planned this evening carefully, but they'd made a crucial error in assuming Rob would play by their rules. The trap was obvious now. They wanted him to lose his temper, to make a scene that would justify whatever they had planned next. The hidden cameras would capture his outburst, providing evidence for restraining orders or custody challenges or whatever legal maneuver they'd orchestrated. But Rob Hayes had learned patience in places where impatience meant death. If Diana and Trevor wanted a show, he'd give them one they'd never forget. Just not the one they were expecting. Chapter 3, The Warning. The party reached its peak as the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows across Trevor's penthouse. Rob had played his part perfectly, the proud father, the gracious ex-husband, the blue-collar worker impressed by his better success. He'd complimented Trevor's art collection, laughed at the appropriate jokes, and endured patronizing questions about his little construction business with good humor. But beneath the surface, his mind was working like a tactical computer, processing every detail and filing it away for later use. The security team's rotation schedule, the timing of the elevator's arrivals, the way Diana's new friends clustered around her like protective sheep, sensing predator without understanding the danger. Emma found him standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city lights beginning to twinkle below. "Penny for your thoughts?" she said, slipping her arm through his. "Just admiring the view," Rob said. "You can see everything from up here. Every building, every street, every secret." Emma studied his profile with concern. "Dad, are you okay? You seem different tonight." "Different how?" "Quieter. Like you're waiting for something." Rob turned to look at his daughter, really look at her. She was beautiful and brilliant and kind, everything good about both her parents without the flaws that had destroyed their marriage. In a few hours, her world was going to change forever, and she didn't deserve the collateral damage that was coming. "Emma," he said carefully, "I need you to know that everything I do because I love you and Luke. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making hard choices." "Dad, you're scaring me." "What are you talking about?" Before Rob could answer, Alex appeared at Emma's side. His oldest son looked every inch the young executive in his tailored suit and silk tie, but there was something in his eyes that Rob had never seen before, guilt mixed with defiance. "Dad," Alex said, his voice carefully neutral. "Mom wants to do the toast soon. She's looking for you." Rob studied his son's face, reading the micro-expressions that betrayed his anxiety. Alex knew something. The question was how much and how long he'd known it. "I'll be right there," Rob said. Alex hesitated, then leaned closer. "Dad, maybe you should consider leaving early tonight. You know, before things get complicated." The warning was subtle but unmistakable. Rob felt something cold settle in his stomach as the pieces clicked into place. Alex wasn't just complicit. He was actively involved in whatever Diana and Trevor had planned. "Complicated how?" Rob asked. Alex glanced around nervously. Just trust me, okay? Leave now. And everyone walks away happy. Emma looked between her father and brother, confusion and growing alarm written across her face. What's going on? Why are you two talking like something bad is about to happen? Nothing's going to happen to you, Rob said, his voice carrying an edge that made Alex step back. I promise you that. Before Alex could respond, the lights dimmed and Diana's voice carried across the room, calling for attention. The crowd gathered in the main living area, champagne glasses in hand, as Diana positioned herself next to Trevor like a politician's wife at a campaign rally. Thank you all for being here tonight, Diana began, her voice warm and gracious. We're here to celebrate Emma's incredible achievement, graduating summa cum laude from Princeton, but also to celebrate family, new beginnings, and the power of love to overcome any obstacle. The crowd murmured appreciatively, but Rob caught the subtle emphasis on new beginnings. This was more than a graduation party. It was Diana's coming-out celebration, her public declaration that she'd successfully traded up from construction worker to hedge fund royalty. As most of you know, Diana continued, the past few years have been challenging for our family. Divorce is never easy, especially when children are involved. But I'm grateful that we've all found a way to move forward with grace and dignity. Rob felt Luke stiffen beside him. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, even for Diana. Grace and dignity, words that apparently didn't apply to stealing half a man's life's work or conducting an affair behind his back. I also want to thank my partner, Trevor, for his patience and support during this transition, Diana said, her hand finding Trevor's. He's been a rock for all of us, especially the children. Trevor has shown Alex and Emma what it means to have a positive male role model, and I couldn't be more grateful. The insult was delivered with surgical precision, wrapped in gratitude but sharp enough to draw blood. Rob felt Emma's hand tighten on his arm as the crowd's eyes turned toward him, waiting for his reaction. But Rob had learned to control his anger in places where emotional reactions meant death. He smiled and raised his champagne glass, playing the role of the gracious loser one last time. To Emma, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room, and to getting exactly what you deserve. The toast was drunk with enthusiasm, but Rob caught the look that passed between Diana and Trevor. They'd expected him to explode, to provide the justification for whatever they had planned. His restraint had thrown them off script. As the crowd began to disperse, Luke grabbed Rob's jacket sleeve. Dad, wait, he hissed, pulling him toward the hallway. You can't use the front door. Rob allowed himself to be pulled away from the main room, following Luke down a service corridor he hadn't noticed before. What are you talking about? Luke glanced around nervously, then pulled out his phone and showed Rob a text message. The sender was listed as unknown, but the message was clear. Your father walks out the front door, he doesn't walk out at all. Service elevator is clean. I got this an hour ago, Luke whispered. I think someone's trying to help us. Rob studied the message, his mind racing through possibilities. Who would know enough about Trevor's plan to warn them? And why risk exposure to help a man they barely knew? This is all set up to trap you, Luke said urgently. I've been watching all night. Trevor's security guys keep checking the front elevator. Something's waiting for you down there. Rob felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. The graduation party, the public humiliation, the careful documentation, it was all designed to provide cover for what came next. They planned to make him disappear, and everyone at the party would swear he'd left angry and threatening violence. Show me this service elevator, Rob said. Luke led him through a maze of service corridors to a freight elevator tucked away behind the kitchen. As they waited for it to arrive, Rob's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Basement garage. Black SUV. Come alone. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, revealing an empty car that smelled of industrial cleaner and fear. Rob stepped inside, but Luke hesitated at the threshold. I'm coming with you, Luke said. No. Rob's voice brooked no argument. Go back to the party. Stay close to Emma. Whatever happens tonight, protect your sister. Dad, that's an order, son. Luke nodded reluctantly and stepped back as the doors closed. As the elevator descended toward whatever waited in the basement, Rob allowed himself a moment of savage satisfaction. Diana and Trevor thought they were chess masters, but they'd been playing checkers while he'd been learning the rules of war. The elevator shuddered to a stop, and the doors opened onto a dimly lit parking garage. A black SUV idled in the shadows, its windows too dark to see inside. Rob stepped out of the elevator, his hand instinctively moving to the small of his back, where his concealed carry permit allowed him to keep a Glock 19. Suddenly, it happened. The SUV's rear door opened, and a figure emerged from the shadows. Someone Rob hadn't expected to see tonight. Someone whose presence changed everything he thought he knew about Diana and Trevor's plan. The man stepped into the light, and Rob's blood ran cold as he recognized the face that had haunted his nightmares for 3 years. Chapter 4. Ghosts and Revelations. Marcus Sullivan emerged from the SUV like a specter from Rob's darkest memories. 3 years in federal prison had aged him, adding gray to his temples and lines around his eyes. But the cold intelligence that had made him Rob's most dangerous enemy remained unchanged. "Hello, Rob," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same cultured tone that had once convinced half of Chicago's elite to invest in his Ponzi scheme. "You look surprised to see me." Rob's hand stayed near his weapon, but he didn't draw. Marcus had always been more dangerous with his mind than his hands, and 3 years in federal lockup had likely sharpened rather than dulled his survival instincts. "Sullivan," Rob said evenly, "I thought you were supposed to be in Leavenworth for another 5 years." "Good behavior and an excellent lawyer," Marcus replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Plus some very generous character witnesses who testified to my rehabilitation. Amazing how money can buy redemption, isn't it?" The pieces began falling into place in Rob's mind. Marcus Sullivan, the financial advisor who tried to steal Rob's company pension fund 12 years ago. The man Rob had personally destroyed when he discovered the scheme, sending him to prison and ruining his reputation. Now Marcus was free and somehow connected to Diana and Trevor's plan. "You sent the warning to Luke," Rob said. "Guilty as charged, though I prefer to think of it as professional courtesy between former adversaries." Marcus gestured toward the SUV. "We need to talk, and this isn't the place. Trevor's security team will be looking for you soon." Rob didn't move. "Talk about what?" "About why your ex-wife and her boyfriend want you dead. About the real reason they're hosting this little celebration tonight. And about why I'm the only thing standing between you and a very creative accident." A sound echoed from the stairwell, footsteps, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Marcus's expression tightened. "Decide now, Rob. Trust me, or trust them. But choose quickly, because in about 30 seconds, this conversation becomes academic." Rob weighed his options in the space of a heartbeat. Marcus Sullivan was a convicted felon and a liar, but he was also brilliant and pragmatic. If he'd wanted Rob dead, there were easier ways to accomplish it than an elaborate rescue. "Talk fast," Rob said, climbing into the SUV. Marcus followed him in and tapped the driver's shoulder. The vehicle moved smoothly through the garage toward the exit as Marcus activated a white noise generator and pulled out a tablet. 2 years ago, your ex-wife approached me through an intermediary," Marcus began. "She wanted information about your business dealings, your finances, your vulnerabilities. Standard divorce warfare stuff, or so I thought. You helped her steal half my assets," Rob said, his voice deadly quiet. "I provided financial analysis in exchange for my legal fees and a modest consulting fee. Nothing illegal about it." Marcus swiped through files on his tablet. "But 3 months ago, Diana contacted me again. This time, she wanted something different. She wanted you gone, permanently." Rob studied Marcus's face for tells, but the man had always been an excellent liar. "Why would you care what happens to me?" "Because killing you is just the opening move in a much larger game," Marcus said. "Diana and Trevor aren't just planning your murder. They're planning to take over your construction company, liquidate your assets, and disappear with approximately $47 million in pension funds that you've been managing for your workers." The number hit Rob like a physical blow. The pension fund was sacred, money that belonged to the men and women who'd bled and sweated to build his company. It was their security, their retirement, their children's futures. "That's impossible," Rob said. "The fund is protected by federal regulations and independent oversight." Marcus smiled grimly. "Not if the fund manager is declared mentally unstable and commits suicide after murdering his ex-wife and her lover in a jealous rage. Trevor's been very carefully setting up that narrative for months." The SUV pulled into an all-night diner's parking lot, and Marcus handed Rob a thick folder. "Police reports showing your escalating behavior. Witness statements from Diana's friends about your threats. Medical records showing your deteriorating mental state following the divorce. It's all fake, but it's very convincing fake. Rob flipped through the documents, his anger building with each fabricated piece of evidence. The psychological profile painted him as a dangerous veteran suffering from PTSD, unable to accept his ex-wife's new relationship. The police reports detailed incidents that had never happened. Domestic disturbances, threatening phone calls, violations of restraining orders that had never been issued. Who else is involved? Rob asked. Your son Alex, obviously. He's been feeding them information about your business operations and personal habits. Trevor's security team, former military contractors who specialize in making problems disappear, and at least 3 judges who owe Trevor favors. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Alex, his firstborn, the son he'd taught to throw a football and drive a stick shift, had sold him out for a corner office and a company car. Why tell me this? Rob asked. What's your angle? Marcus leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. Revenge is a dish best served cold, as they say. Diana and Trevor destroyed my life when they convinced those investors to press charges against me. Now they're using my playbook to destroy you, and frankly, I find that insulting. Plus, if they succeed in stealing that pension fund, it triggers a federal investigation that will eventually trace back to my consulting work. I'd rather not spend my golden years in a federal penitentiary. Rob closed the folder and studied Marcus's face. The man was still a snake, but he was a snake with a reason to keep Rob alive. In the current circumstances, that made him more trustworthy than Rob's own family. What do you propose? Rob asked. Marcus smiled, and for a moment, Rob glimpsed the predatory intelligence that had made him so dangerous. Simple. We turn their own plan against them. Diana and Trevor want you to disappear tonight? Fine. Let's give them exactly what they want. Explain. You're supposed to die in that penthouse, probably in some kind of struggle where you kill Diana and Trevor before turning the gun on yourself. Very tragic, very convincing, very final. But what if Robert Hayes dies tonight, and someone else walks away? Rob felt a chill run down his spine. You're talking about faking my death. I'm talking about becoming a ghost. Trevor's plan requires your body to disappear, which means he's already arranged for cleanup and disposal. We use his own resources against him, let him think he's succeeded, and then we systematically destroy everything he's built. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Fake his own death, let Diana and Trevor believe they'd won, and then destroy them from the shadows. It was brilliant, brutal, and completely insane. My children, Rob said. Emma and Luke will think I'm dead. Marcus nodded grimly. For a while, yes. But consider the alternative. They'll definitely think you're dead if you're actually dead. This way, you can protect them from a distance and eventually reveal the truth. Rob stared out the window at the diner's neon sign, weighing his options. Every instinct told him to go back to that penthouse and settle this the direct way, with his bare hands and a complete disregard for consequences. But Marcus was right about one thing. Trevor's plan was too sophisticated for a frontal assault. How long would I have to stay dead? Rob asked. Long enough to gather evidence and build a case that will destroy them completely. Months, maybe a year. But when it's over, Diana and Trevor will lose everything. Their money, their freedom, their lives. Rob made his decision. If Diana and Trevor wanted to play games with his family's future, he'd show them what a real strategist could do. Let them think they'd won. Let them celebrate their victory. In the shadows, Robert Hayes would die, and something much more dangerous would be born. What do you need from me? Rob asked. Marcus smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Rob had ever seen. Just trust me, and be ready to become someone else. By tomorrow morning, Robert Hayes will be a memory, and your real revenge can begin. Chapter 5. The Death of Robert Hayes. The plan Marcus outlined was elegant in its simplicity and horrifying in its implications. Rob would return to the penthouse, but not as himself, as a dead man walking, playing out the final act of Trevor's script while secretly recording everything. Marcus handed him a small device that looked like a shirt button. Voice recorder with 12 hours of battery life. Whatever happens tonight, we'll have evidence of their conspiracy. And after you disappear, I have contacts who specialize in creating new identities for people who need to vanish. Within 24 hours, Robert Hayes will be officially dead, and you'll become someone else entirely. Rob studied the device, then carefully worked it into his suit jacket's button panel. What about my body? Trevor's people will expect to clean up the crime scene. Marcus pulled out another piece of equipment, a small vial of dark liquid. Theatrical blood. When the shooting starts, you go down. I trigger a small explosive charge that takes out the lights, and in the confusion, you're extracted through the service corridors. You make it sound simple. The best plans usually are. It's the execution that gets complicated. Marcus checked his watch. We need to move. Trevor's security team is probably wondering where you went. Rob climbed out of the SUV and paused. Sullivan, why are you really doing this? The truth this time. Marcus met his eyes, and for a moment, the mask slipped. Because 12 years ago, you could have destroyed me quietly. Instead, you gave me the chance to come clean, to pay back what I'd stolen. I chose to fight you, and I lost everything because of that choice. Consider this my attempt to balance the scales. Rob nodded and walked back toward the Meridian Tower. The night air was cool against his skin, and he found himself memorizing details. The sound of traffic, the smell of hot dog vendors, the feel of concrete beneath his feet. After tonight, Robert Hayes would never experience any of it again. The lobby was empty except for the night security guard, who barely looked up from his magazine as Rob headed for the service elevator. The ride to the 47th floor felt eternal, each floor number a countdown to his own death. The penthouse was quieter now, most of the guests having departed. Rob could hear voices from the main living area, Diana's laugh, Trevor's commanding tone, the clink of glasses being cleared away. He moved through the service corridors like a ghost, using the layout he'd memorized earlier to position himself near the main room. Through a crack in the door, he could see the final act beginning to unfold. Diana stood near the windows, still in her black cocktail dress, but with her shoes off and her hair slightly mussed. Trevor was at the bar, pouring himself a whiskey with the satisfied air of a man whose plans were proceeding perfectly. Alex sat on the leather sofa, his tie loosened and his expression troubled. Emma had clearly been sent away. Rob could see her coat was gone from the front closet. Only Luke remained, standing near the kitchen entrance with the careful posture of someone ready to run or fight. Where is he? Trevor asked, checking his watch. Your father should have been back by now. Maybe he actually left, Alex said hopefully. Maybe he finally got the message. Diana shook her head. Robert doesn't give up that easily. He's planning something. I can feel it. Then perhaps it's time to accelerate our timeline, a new voice said. Rob tensed as a man emerged from the study, tall, broad-shouldered, with the precise movements of professional security. This wasn't one of the waitstaff Rob had identified earlier. This was Trevor's real muscle, the cleanup crew Marcus had warned him about. Mr. Manning, the man continued, my team has visual confirmation that the target left the building approximately 90 minutes ago. He should have returned by now if he was simply taking a break. Trevor's expression darkened. Could he have discovered the surveillance? Unlikely, sir. But we should consider the possibility that he's planning to involve law enforcement or media. The window for containment is closing. Rob felt his blood run cold as the implications became clear. They weren't just planning to kill him. They were planning to kill him tonight, with Luke still in the penthouse. What about Luke? Diana asked, as if reading Rob's thoughts. Collateral damage, Trevor said dismissively. The boy chose his side when he refused our offers. Sometimes children have to pay for their parents' mistakes. Luke stepped forward, his young face flushed with anger. You're talking about murdering my father, and now you're threatening me too? The security man's hand moved toward his jacket, but Diana held up a restraining gesture. Luke, honey, you don't understand the situation. Your father is dangerous. He's been making threats, acting erratically. We're trying to protect everyone. By killing him, Luke's voice cracked with emotion. Mom, how can you even think about this? Because your father won't let go, Diana said, her voice hardening. He can't accept that I've moved on, that I'm happy now. He's going to keep coming after us, keep trying to destroy what Trevor and I have built. Sometimes you have to choose between being kind and being safe. Rob had heard enough. He activated the recording device and stepped into the room, his hands visible and empty. Interesting conversation. Mind if I join? The reaction was immediate and telling. Trevor's hand went to his phone, undoubtedly triggering some kind of alert. The security man reached for his weapon but didn't draw it yet. Diana's face went pale, then flushed with anger and fear. Only Alex seemed genuinely surprised. Dad? Where did you go? Just taking some air, Rob said casually. Amazing what you can hear when people think you're not listening. Diana, sweetheart, you've really outdone yourself this time. Diana's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath her society wife facade. Robert, you shouldn't have come back. No, I really shouldn't have, Rob agreed. But I've never been good at doing what I should. It's one of my many character flaws. Trevor stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. Robert, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we should sit down and discuss. Discuss what? Rob interrupted. How you're planning to murder me and steal my workers' pension fund. Or should we start with how you've been screwing my wife since before our divorce was final? The security man tensed, but Rob held up a hand. Easy there, Rambo. I'm not here for a fight. I'm here for answers. Answers to what? Diana demanded. To why my own son helped you set me up, Rob said, his eyes finding Alex. To why you thought you could steal money from people who trusted me. To why you're willing to murder a 16-year-old boy to cover your tracks. Alex stood up slowly, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Dad, I never wanted it to go this far. They said it was just about the divorce settlement, about making sure Mom got what she deserved. And what exactly did your mother deserve, son? Everything, Alex said quietly. She gave you the best years of her life, and you gave her a construction worker's salary and a blue-collar life. She deserved better. Rob felt something break inside his chest, not his heart, but something deeper and more fundamental. The last connection to the son he'd raised, the final thread of hope that Alex might still be saved. I see, Rob said. And the pension fund? Do my workers deserve to lose their retirement because your mother wanted a better class of friends? Alex couldn't meet his eyes. Trevor said there were ways to protect the workers, to make sure they didn't get hurt. Trevor lies for a living, son. It's how he makes his money. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the city below. Rob could feel the tension building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Everyone was waiting for the violence to begin, for the script to play out as Trevor had written it. But Rob had a different ending in mind. You know what the real tragedy is here? Rob said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You're all going to lose. Not because I'm going to stop you, though I am, but because you're too stupid to realize you're already caught. Trevor's composure finally cracked. What are you talking about? Rob smiled, and it was the expression of a man who'd already won. Marcus Sullivan says hello. The name hit the room like a grenade, and Rob watched as comprehension dawned on their faces. Diana went white. Trevor's hand shook as he reached for his phone. The security man drew his weapon, but it was already too late. The lights went out, plunging the penthouse into darkness. In the chaos that followed, shouts, gunshots, the sound of breaking glass, Robert Hayes died as planned. But something much more dangerous was about to be born. Chapter 6, Ghost Protocol. The explosion wasn't large, just enough to blow out the penthouse's main electrical panel and plunge the 47th floor into chaos. In the darkness that followed, Rob felt Marcus's hands grab his shoulders, pulling him through the service corridor as gunshots echoed behind them. Move, 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 Marcus hissed, guiding Rob through the maze of service passages with the precision of someone who'd studied the building's blueprints. Behind them, Trevor's voice cut through the darkness. Find him. Check every room, every closet. He doesn't leave this building alive. They reached the freight elevator just as emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Marcus jabbed the button repeatedly, then pulled out a small device and began working on the elevator's control panel. How long? Rob asked, checking the recorder to make sure it was still functioning. 2 minutes, Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the device's interface. My people are in position in the garage, but we need to get down there before Trevor's security locks down the building. The elevator arrived with a soft ding that sounded deafening in the silence. They stepped inside, and Marcus immediately activated an override that sent them plummeting toward the basement levels. The blood worked. Rob asked, looking down at the dark stains across his shirt and jacket. You should see yourself, Marcus said grimly. Very convincing death scene. Trevor's people will find enough DNA evidence to confirm your presence, but not enough to question the story. And Luke? Safe. My people extracted him during the confusion. As far as anyone knows, he ran during the gunfight and escaped before the security team could stop him. Rob felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Whatever happened next, his youngest son was alive and protected. Emma was already away from the penthouse, probably at her college apartment, blissfully unaware that her world had just imploded. The elevator shuddered to a stop in a sub-basement Rob hadn't known existed. Marcus led him through a series of service tunnels that connected to the adjacent building, where a van waited with its engine running. "From here, you disappear," Marcus said as they climbed into the van. "New identity, new life, new everything. You'll be briefed on your cover story during the drive." As the van pulled away from the Meridian Tower, Rob caught a glimpse of flashing lights in his side mirror. Police cars, ambulances, fire trucks, all responding to reports of shots fired in the penthouse. By dawn, the story would be all over the news. Construction executive Robert Hayes had snapped, attacked his ex-wife and her boyfriend, and disappeared into the night. "How long before they declare me dead?" Rob asked. 48 to 72 hours, Marcus replied. "Trevor will want the investigation wrapped up quickly before anyone starts asking inconvenient questions. He'll provide evidence of your deteriorating mental state and your threats against Diana. The police will conclude you died fleeing the scene, probably jumped from a bridge or something equally dramatic." The van turned onto the highway, heading north out of the city. Rob stared out the window at the lights of Manhattan fading behind them, knowing he might never see them again. Robert Hayes, husband, father, businessman, was officially dead. What emerged from his ashes would be something entirely different. "Tell me about my new identity," Rob said. Marcus handed him a manila envelope. "Michael Crawford, age 45, recently retired from the military. You're a security consultant with a spotless background and excellent references. The identity will hold up to anything short of federal investigation." Rob opened the envelope and studied the documents inside. Driver's license, passport, credit cards, even a discharge certificate from the Army Rangers. All perfectly crafted forgeries that would pass any casual inspection. "What about my appearance?" "Hair dye, colored contacts, subtle facial prosthetics to change your bone structure. Nothing dramatic, just enough to ensure facial recognition software won't flag you. My people are very good at making people disappear." The van pulled into a warehouse complex outside the city, where a medical team was waiting. Over the next 6 hours, Rob underwent a transformation that was both physical and psychological. His dark hair became salt and pepper gray. His brown eyes became blue. Temporary dental work changed the shape of his jawline. When it was finished, Rob looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at him. Michael Crawford was similar enough to Robert Hayes to pass for a relative, but different enough to avoid recognition. Even his own children would need a second look to identify him. "The transformation is temporary," the makeup artist explained. "The prosthetics will need to be replaced every few weeks, and the hair color will fade over time. But it should be sufficient for your immediate needs." Marcus appeared at Rob's shoulder, also transformed. His gray hair was now black, his aristocratic features softened by subtle changes. "Welcome to the Ghost Protocol, Michael. Ready to learn how dead men take their revenge?" Over the next several days, Rob, now Michael Crawford, was given a crash course in covert operations. He learned about surveillance and counter-surveillance, document forgery, financial crime investigation, and a dozen other skills he'd never needed as a construction executive. Marcus had assembled a team of specialists, former intelligence operatives, white-collar crime investigators, computer hackers, and financial analysts. All of them had reasons to want Trevor Manning destroyed, and all of them had skills that complemented Rob's natural strategic instincts. "Think of it as a hostile corporate takeover," Marcus explained during one of their planning sessions. "Trevor has built his empire on other people's money and other people's trust. We're going to systematically destroy both." The first target was Alex. Rob's oldest son had returned to work at Manning Financial as if nothing had happened, but his colleagues were already whispering about his father's disappearance. The psychological pressure of believing he'd contributed to his father's death was beginning to show. "He's drinking more," reported Sarah Chun, a financial analyst Marcus had placed inside Manning Financial 6 months earlier. "Missing meetings, making mistakes. Trevor's starting to see him as a liability rather than an asset." "Good," Rob said, studying surveillance photos of his son leaving his apartment building. Alex chose his side. Now he gets to live with the consequences. The second target was Diana. Rob's ex-wife had played the grieving ex-spouse perfectly in her police interviews, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd celebrated too soon. Luxury purchases, expensive vacations, a new wardrobe that cost more than most people's annual salary. The widow's benefits from Rob's life insurance would cover some of it, but not the level of spending she'd begun. She's accessing the pension fund, Marcus reported. Small amounts, routed through shell companies, but it's definitely happening. Trevor's moving faster than we anticipated. The third target was Trevor himself. Manning Financial looked solid from the outside, but Marcus's investigation had revealed dangerous cracks in the foundation. Trevor had been using client funds to cover his own losses for years, moving money between accounts like a shell game to avoid detection. He's a more sophisticated version of what I used to be, Marcus admitted. But sophistication only works if you're smarter than everyone else in the room. Trevor's not as smart as he thinks he is. Rob studied the evidence Marcus had compiled: bank records, client statements, regulatory filings that didn't quite add up. It was a house of cards held together by Trevor's reputation and his client's trust. All it would take was the right pressure in the right place, and everything would collapse. How long? Rob asked. 3 months, maybe 4. We need to be careful. If we move too fast, Trevor might cut his losses and disappear. We want him trapped when the house comes down. Rob nodded, but privately he had a different timeline in mind. 3 months was too long. His children were out there believing their father was dead, grieving for a man who was actually planning their tormentor's destruction. Emma would graduate from Princeton in 6 weeks. Luke would finish his junior year of high school in 8. He wanted to be alive again when his children needed him most. What about accelerating the timeline? Rob asked. Marcus studied his expression and smiled grimly. I was hoping you'd say that. Patience is a virtue, but revenge is an art form. And art should have an element of surprise. They spread the surveillance photos across the table. Diana at her country club, Alex at his office, Trevor at his downtown headquarters. 3 people who thought they'd won, who believed their victory was complete and permanent. They were about to learn that some ghosts don't rest quietly. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. 6 weeks after Robert Hayes died, Michael Crawford sat in a coffee shop across from Manning Financial's headquarters, watching his oldest son through high-powered binoculars. Alex looked terrible, thin, pale, jumping at shadows. The guilt was eating him alive, just as Rob had hoped it would. He's been popping pills, Sarah Chun reported through Rob's earpiece. Anxiety medication, sleeping pills, probably some recreational stuff too. Trevor's noticed. Word is he's planning to cut Alex loose before he becomes a liability. Rob adjusted his focus, studying Alex's face as his son emerged from the building. There was a haunted quality to his expression, the look of a man who'd sold his soul and was beginning to understand the price. Any word from Emma or Luke? Emma's been calling Alex every few days, worried about his drinking. Luke refuses to speak to him at all. Your younger son has essentially disowned his brother. Rob felt a complex mix of pride and sorrow. Luke had chosen loyalty over comfort, righteousness over opportunity. Emma, meanwhile, was trying to hold her shattered family together through pure force of will. Time to accelerate Phase 2, Rob said, closing the binoculars. Phase 2 was Marcus's masterpiece, a carefully orchestrated campaign to destroy Trevor's reputation and business simultaneously. It began with anonymous tips to regulatory agencies about irregularities in Manning Financial's client accounts. Small discrepancies at first, just enough to trigger audits and investigations. While regulatory pressure built from one direction, Rob began applying personal pressure from another. As Michael Crawford, he'd established himself as a freelance security consultant specializing in corporate espionage. His first client was Elena Vasquez, one of Trevor's former partners who'd been forced out of the hedge fund business after Trevor had systematically destroyed her reputation. I want evidence, Elena told him during their meeting at an upscale restaurant. Proof that Trevor Manning is the lying, thieving bastard I know him to be. Money is no object. Rob smiled with Michael Crawford's face. Evidence is my specialty, Ms. Vasquez. Give me 2 weeks. What he gave her was better than evidence. He gave her Trevor's complete client list, detailed financial records, and documented proof of the shell game Trevor had been playing with investor funds. Elena took the information straight to the SEC, the FBI, and 3 major financial news outlets. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Manhattan hedge fund under federal investigation for fraud. By noon, Manning Financial's phones were ringing constantly as panicked investors demanded explanations. By evening, Trevor had hired the city's most expensive crisis management firm. He's hemorrhaging clients. Marcus reported from his position inside the financial district. 12 major investors pulled their money today, and more are threatening to follow. The firm's lost about 60% of its assets under management in less than 8 hours. Rob watched the chaos unfold from his hotel room, feeling a deep satisfaction he hadn't experienced since the divorce proceedings began. Trevor was finally learning what it felt like to have his life's work threatened by forces beyond his control. But the real stroke of genius came from an unexpected source, Luke. Rob's youngest son had been busy during the weeks since his father's death. Using skills he'd learned from watching his father manage the construction company, Luke had been quietly documenting every expense Diana had charged to the pension fund, every luxury purchase she'd made with money that belonged to Rob's workers. The evidence arrived at Rob's hotel via encrypted email, sent from an anonymous account Luke had created. Photos of Diana's new jewelry, receipts for expensive vacations, bank statements showing transfers from pension accounts to personal spending accounts. Everything Rob needed to destroy his ex-wife completely. Smart kid, Marcus observed, reviewing the evidence. He's been collecting this for weeks, just waiting for the right moment to use it. He's my son, Rob said proudly. He understands that some betrayals can't be forgiven. The pension fund evidence went to the Department of Labor, the FBI, and Rob's former employees simultaneously. Within hours, federal agents were knocking on Diana's door with search warrants and subpoenas. The local news picked up the story by evening. Widow of missing construction executive charged with pension fund theft. Diana's carefully crafted image as the grieving ex-wife crumbled under the weight of evidence Luke had provided. Rob watched Diana's perp walk on the evening news, seeing his ex-wife led away in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions about the stolen pension money. Her black cocktail dress had been replaced by orange jail scrubs, her diamond jewelry by metal handcuffs. One down, Rob murmured to himself. Alex was next. Rob's oldest son had been gradually isolating himself as the pressure mounted, drinking heavily and making increasingly erratic decisions at work. When federal investigators began examining Manning Financial's employment records, they discovered that Alex Hayes had been receiving payments that far exceeded his qualifications or contributions to the firm. The payments looked like bribes, which, in essence, they were. Trevor had been paying Alex for information about his father's business operations, but the financial trail made it appear that Alex was receiving kickbacks for steering pension fund investments toward Manning Financial. He's not guilty of what they think he's guilty of, Marcus observed as they watched Alex being led away by federal agents. But he's guilty of enough to make the charges stick. Rob felt no sympathy for his oldest son. Alex had chosen greed over loyalty, comfort over family. Now he would learn that choices had consequences, and some consequences lasted a lifetime. With Diana in federal custody and Alex facing charges of his own, Trevor Manning found himself completely isolated. His business was collapsing, his co-conspirators were either dead or imprisoned, and federal investigators were closing in on evidence of his massive fraud scheme. But Trevor had one final card to play, and it was aimed directly at the people Rob cared about most. He's hired a team of investigators, Sarachin reported during an emergency meeting. Private military contractors, the kind of people who specialize in making problems disappear permanently. Word is he's offering serious money to anyone who can find Emma and Luke Hayes. Rob felt ice form in his stomach. Trevor was done playing games. If he was going down, he intended to take Rob's children with him. How much time do we have? Rob asked. Maybe 48 hours before his people track them down. Emma's at Princeton, which makes her easy to find. Luke's staying with friends, but he's still going to high school. Trevor's people are professionals. They'll find both kids by the weekend. Rob stood up, his decision made. The careful plan, the patient revenge, the systematic destruction of his enemies. All of it was secondary to his children's safety. Time to end this, he said. Marcus nodded grimly. What do you need? Everything. Weapons, backup, and a plan to take Trevor down before he hurts my kids. And after? Once Trevor's dead, Michael Crawford disappears, and Robert Hayes has to stay dead. You'll never be able to see your children again. Rob considered this for exactly 3 seconds. Then I'll have to kill Trevor in a way that allows Robert Hayes to come back from the dead. Marcus smiled, and it was the expression of a man who'd been waiting his entire life to plan the perfect crime. Now you're thinking like a ghost. Chapter 8, Resurrection. The plan Marcus devised was audacious even by his standards. Fake Rob's resurrection, while simultaneously destroying Trevor Manning in a way that would satisfy federal investigators and close all remaining questions about Robert Hayes' death. Trevor thinks you're dead, Marcus explained as they reviewed surveillance photos of Manning Financial's headquarters. That's his weakness. Dead men can't testify against him, can't provide evidence of his crimes, can't threaten his operations. He's gotten careless because he believes the primary threat has been eliminated. Rob studied the building's layout, noting security cameras, guard positions, and escape routes. How do we use that against him? Simple. We let him see a ghost. The setup required precise timing and Marcus's extensive network of criminal contacts. First, they needed to stage a scenario where Trevor would confess to Robert Hayes' murder while believing he was speaking to someone who couldn't repeat the conversation. The opportunity came when Trevor's lawyers arranged a meeting with a potential witness, someone claiming to have information about Robert Hayes' final days. The witness was actually one of Marcus's associates, equipped with hidden recording devices and the acting skills to convince Trevor he was speaking with a fellow criminal. Hayes contacted me the night he died. The fake witness told Trevor during their recorded conversation. Said he was going to expose everything, bring down everyone involved in the pension fund scheme. Sounded desperate, paranoid, like a man who knew his time was running out. Trevor's response was everything they'd hoped for. Robert Hayes was a problem that needed to be solved permanently. Some men won't listen to reason, won't accept when they've lost. Hayes was one of those men. The world is better off without him. You killed him yourself? I had him killed. Trevor corrected, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man confessing his greatest achievement. Made it look like he fled the scene after attacking his ex-wife. The police never even questioned the narrative. Why would they? It fit perfectly with his psychological profile. The recording was damning, but it wasn't enough by itself. They needed physical evidence, witnesses, and a crime scene that would convince federal investigators Trevor had indeed murdered Robert Hayes. That's where the resurrection came in. We're going to stage your return from the dead, Marcus explained, complete with witnesses, physical evidence, and a confrontation that ends with Trevor confessing to your murder on camera. The location was perfect, the penthouse where Rob had supposedly died. Trevor still owned the building, still controlled access to the 47th floor. He'd kept the crime scene exactly as it was the night of the shooting, partly for legal reasons and partly because he enjoyed the trophy. Marcus's team infiltrated the building through the same service corridors they'd used for Rob's escape. They planted cameras throughout the penthouse, positioned backup operatives in adjacent buildings, and prepared multiple escape routes in case the plan went sideways. The bait was simple, an anonymous message to Trevor claiming that Robert Hayes was alive and planning to expose everything. The message included photos of Robert Hayes, taken from a distance, showing a man who looked exactly like the supposedly dead construction executive. Trevor's response was immediate and predictable. He arrived at the penthouse with a 3-man security team, armed and ready to finish what he'd started 6 weeks earlier. Rob was waiting for him in the main living room, standing exactly where he'd stood the night he died. He'd removed the prosthetics and colored contacts, allowing his natural appearance to show through. In the dim lighting, he looked exactly like Robert Hayes returned from the grave. "Hello, Trevor," Rob said as Trevor's security team swept the penthouse. Trevor went white, then red, then white again. His hand shook as he reached for his weapon, but his security team had already drawn theirs. "You're dead," Trevor whispered. "I watched you die." There was blood, DNA evidence. There was theatrical blood and planted evidence, Rob corrected. Amazing what you can accomplish when you know what people are looking for. Trevor's mind was clearly racing, trying to process the implications of Rob's survival. If you're alive, then everything, the investigation, the charges against Diana and Alex. All based on evidence you helped create, Rob said. Fraud, theft, conspiracy to commit murder. The federal case against you is ironclad, Trevor. The only question is whether you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison or face the death penalty. Unless, Rob smiled. Unless nothing. You're finished, Trevor. Your business is destroyed, your co-conspirators are in custody, and you're about to be arrested for my murder. Trevor's security team looked confused, unsure whether they should be protecting their employer from a dead man or arresting a supposedly dead man for being alive. In their hesitation, Rob saw his opportunity. You want to know how I survived? Rob asked. How I managed to fake my own death and frame you for murder at the same time. Tell me, Trevor demanded. Rob began explaining Marcus's plan, describing each step of the elaborate deception while hidden cameras recorded every word. Trevor listened with growing horror as he realized how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. You turned my own plan against me, Trevor said finally. I turned your arrogance against you, Rob corrected. You thought you were playing chess with a construction worker. You never realized you were playing against a Marine who'd spent 15 years learning how to kill people smarter than you. The federal agents arrived exactly on schedule, just as Rob finished his explanation. They burst through the penthouse doors with overwhelming force, shouting commands and pointing weapons at everyone in the room. In the chaos that followed, Trevor made a critical mistake. He tried to shoot Rob, screaming about ghosts and dead men and elaborate conspiracies that made him sound completely insane. The agents took him down hard, and the struggle provided perfect cover for Marcus's team to extract Rob through the service corridors. Within minutes, Robert Hayes was officially alive again, while Trevor Manning was under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and a dozen other charges that would keep him in federal prison for the rest of his life. The news media went wild with the story. Dead construction executive returns to expose murder plot. Rob gave a carefully scripted interview explaining how he'd gone into hiding after discovering the conspiracy against him, how he'd gathered evidence while letting his enemies believe they'd succeeded in killing him. The narrative was compelling, believable, and completely false, but it gave federal prosecutors everything they needed to close their cases against Diana, Alex, and Trevor. More importantly, it allowed Robert Hayes to return to his children as a hero rather than a victim. Emma was waiting for him at the airport when he flew back to New York, tears streaming down her face as she ran into his arms. Luke was more reserved, but Rob could see the relief in his son's eyes, the knowledge that his father had survived, that the family wasn't completely destroyed. I thought I'd lost you forever, Emma whispered against his chest. You never lost me, Rob replied. I was always watching, always protecting you. I just had to do it from the shadows for a while. And Alex? Luke asked quietly. Rob's expression hardened. Your brother made his choice. Actions have consequences, and some consequences last a lifetime. Alex would spend the next decade in federal prison, his promising career destroyed by his own greed and betrayal. Diana would serve 25 years for pension fund theft and conspiracy. Trevor would never see freedom again. But Rob had his surviving children back, his business intact, and his enemies completely destroyed. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't served cold. Sometimes it was served with a resurrection that reminded everyone that some men were too stubborn to stay dead. Chapter 9, New Foundations. 1 year after his resurrection, Robert Hayes stood on the construction site where Manning Financial's headquarters had once been planned. The building had never been completed. Federal seizure orders had frozen the project when Trevor's empire collapsed. Now Rob's company was tearing down the unfinished structure, preparing the ground for something better. Dad, Emma's voice came from behind him. She'd driven up from Princeton for the weekend. Her graduate school applications spread across the passenger seat of her car. The workers want to know if you're ready for the ceremonial first swing. Rob turned to see his daughter approaching, no longer the sheltered teenager who'd graduated from Princeton a year ago. The events of the past year had aged her, but they'd also strengthened her. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Where's Luke? Rob asked, checking his watch. Running late, as usual. Something about a final exam he couldn't reschedule. Emma smiled, the expression lighting up her face. He's been pushing himself pretty hard since he got early admission to MIT. Luke had thrown himself into his studies with the intensity of someone trying to prove something. To himself, to his father, to the world. His early admission to MIT's engineering program was just the beginning of what Rob suspected would be a remarkable career. Any word from your brother? Rob asked, though he already knew the answer. Emma's expression darkened. He writes sometimes. Letters from federal prison aren't exactly cheerful reading material. Alex's letters had started arriving 3 months ago, rambling apologies mixed with self-justification and requests for money for the prison commissary. Rob had read the first one, then instructed his secretary to return all subsequent letters unopened. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. He made his choice, Rob said firmly. We all have to live with our choices. The demolition crew was assembled and waiting, hard hats in place and equipment positioned for maximum symbolic impact. Rob had invited the media to witness the destruction of Trevor's legacy, the literal burying of the corruption that had nearly destroyed his family. Marcus Sullivan appeared at Rob's elbow, looking every inch the reformed criminal in his expensive suit and wire-rimmed glasses. His transformation from con man to legitimate business consultant had been remarkably successful, though Rob suspected the reformation was more pragmatic than spiritual. The prosecutor's office called. Marcus reported quietly. Trevor's appeal was denied. He'll die in federal prison, just like we planned. And Diana? Denied parole again. The pension fund trustees made sure the parole board understood exactly how many families she'd hurt with her theft. She won't see daylight for another 15 years, minimum. Rob nodded with satisfaction. Justice wasn't always swift, but it could be thorough when properly applied. Luke arrived just as Rob was preparing to swing the ceremonial sledgehammer, his young face flushed from running across the construction site. At 17, he'd grown 3 inches and gained 30 pounds of muscle, transforming from a skinny teenager into a young man who looked disturbingly like Rob at the same age. Sorry I'm late, Luke panted. Chemistry final ran long. How did it go? Aced it. MIT, here I come. Luke grinned. Then his expression grew more serious. Dad, before you swing that hammer, I want you to know that what you did last year, the way you protected us. I understand now why you had to disappear for a while. Rob felt something tight and his chest loosened slightly. Luke's anger about the deception had been slow to fade, but understanding had gradually replaced resentment. I hated lying to you, Rob said, but keeping you safe was more important than keeping you informed. I know, and I'm proud of you for it. Emma stepped forward and took Rob's other arm. We both are. Trevor and Mom and Alex thought they could destroy our family, but they just made us stronger. Rob looked at his surviving children. Emma with her brilliant mind and fierce loyalty, Luke with his determination and moral clarity, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, complete satisfaction. He raised the sledgehammer and brought it down on the symbolic first wall, the impact reverberating through the construction site like a gunshot. The assembled workers cheered as heavy machinery moved in to continue the demolition, tearing down the monument to Trevor's arrogance piece by piece. What are you going to build here? A reporter called out. Rob considered the question as he watched Trevor's dream crumble into rubble. Affordable housing, he said finally. Places where working families can live with dignity. The kind of project Trevor Manning would have hated. The irony was perfect. Trevor's final humiliation would be watching his luxury development become homes for the very people he'd spent his life looking down on. Even from his federal prison cell, he'd be able to see the lights of families who'd moved in where his penthouse was supposed to stand. As the demolition continued, Rob walked to the edge of the construction site where a small memorial had been erected. It wasn't for Trevor or Diana or Alex. It was for the Robert Hayes who died in that penthouse a year ago. The man who trusted too easily, forgiven too quickly, and learned too late that some people couldn't be saved from their own greed. That Robert Hayes was gone forever, replaced by someone harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. The new Robert Hayes didn't forgive betrayal or forget enemies. He understood that loyalty was earned, trust was fragile, and family was defined by actions rather than blood. Any regrets? Marcus asked, joining him at the memorial. Rob considered the question seriously. Alex was in prison, probably for the rest of his productive life. Diana was facing decades behind bars. Trevor would die in federal custody. The family he'd built over 25 years of marriage was permanently shattered. None, Rob said finally. They all got exactly what they deserved. Marcus smiled, the expression of a man who'd found his perfect partner in revenge. What's next? The construction business seems a little tame after the past year. Rob watched his workers clearing debris from the demolished structure, preparing the ground for something better. I'm thinking about expanding. There are a lot of people out there who need protection from predators like Trevor. Maybe it's time to start a different kind of construction company. Building what? Rob's smile was cold as winter wind. Justice. One foundation at a time. As the sun set over Manhattan, Robert Hayes stood among the ruins of his enemy's ambitions and planned his next project. Some men built with concrete and steel. Others built with fear and respect. The smart ones built with both. The construction business was about to get a lot more interesting. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.